as we all anxiously await the results of what is one of the biggest presidential elections of our lifetimes, the United States also marks the 100-year anniversary of women gaining the right to vote. It is only now, in 2020, that we see the first woman of color, Kamala Harris, to serve as a candidate on a major party ticket. The events of this year have brought several deep-rooted issues our country has long carried to light. The Black community, in particular Black women and gender non-conforming individuals, are disproportionately affected by disparities in education, healthcare, and labor wages. As a young Cuban-American woman, it is my civic responsibility to learn and educate others on how to work together to build a more just and inclusive world. Here at the Frost Art Museum, we aim to continue diversifying the narrative. Today we invite 5 women to share their voices with us. I'd like you to join me in welcoming our first speaker, Caldwell Harris. Caldwell is a Liberian-American currently majoring in international business and marketing. She is also a member of FIU Honors College. Her interests include history, namely African and African-American history and the African diaspora, politics, racial, economic, and social injustice, and travel. Post-graduation, she hopes to pursue a terminal degree or begin a career in the business sector of the fashion industry. Let's welcome our very own marketing assistant, Caldwell Harris. All right, well, so Caldwell is in Tallahassee, so she's joining us virtually. Just give us a second to get her on this call. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the introduction, Emily, and thank you for having me today. I'm Caldwell, and today I'll be reading a piece I wrote earlier this summer, shortly after George Floyd was murdered. This piece is titled The Conversation. Jamestown, 1619. 3/5 compromise. Separate but equal. KKK. Hate crimes. Emmett Till. Jim Crow South. Black Wall Street. Systemic racism, racial profiling, aka random selection, mass incarceration, the prison industrial complex. If you've been sheltered from the fact that the above had an effect on the African Americans and people of color, then you likely only understand history from the pages of an overly patriotic high school textbook. From Jamestown, 1619, the prison industrial complex, and George Floyd's murder, there's a common red, white, and blue thread that connects them all. Red for bloodshed, white for white supremacy, covert and overt, and blue for the police. Before you proclaim racism is dead, all lives matter, or we're all one human family, you must acknowledge the prejudiced, racist systems and culture that America is built on. This is the same culture that has and continues to treat Black people as the enemy, the other. If the above concepts are new to you, then it is likely that you are not African American or you are oblivious to our American experience. I remember having the conversation with my parents. The conversation is the talk that all Black and non-white POC parents have or have to have with their children. Why? because our parents need to have these conversations with us before we start assuming we have equal levels of protection as our white counterparts, or before we end up under the knee of one of the boys in blue for 8 minutes. Each version of the conversation is different, yet the same in sentiment. It may detail the following: why you'll be perceived as a threat regardless of age, stature, or socioeconomic status, why you'll have to work twice as hard to be considered half as great, why you might be the only person in the room that looks like you, and why you should be wary of the police. The same police that others grew up believing are there to protect and serve. In other words, you'll learn the police are not there to protect you. The conversation is one that I'll never forget. And if you've never had to have it with your parents or friends, consider yourself privileged. I'd go into detail about the version of the conversation that I had with my parents, but it's incredibly personal. However, the conversation didn't end there. My family and I had it again and again each time another Black life was lost. Here are some benchmarks. I was 12 when Trayvon Martin got shot in the back. I was 16 with a newly minted driver's license when Sandra Bland was forced out of her car and slammed to the ground for not using a turn signal. She later died in her cell. When I was 18, Stephon Clark was murdered for grabbing his cell phone, and Alton Sterling was shot for selling CDs. Now I'm 21, facing the implications of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor while reconciling with concepts I've been painfully aware of since the conversation I had with my parents in elementary school. Enough is enough. Think of all the names we know, and remember that there are so many more names that we don't. You must educate yourself on experiences that are outside of your own, and remember your privilege is what's protected you from being face to face with the truth. Do not expect your Black friends or colleagues to educate you on these matters as we live through this reality every day. If I had the conversation with my parents while I was still ordering from the kids menu, you can educate yourself independently and do better. If you need a place to start, close your eyes and recount the abridged topics I've covered throughout this speech. Then, maybe you'll understand why the journey of African Americans is full of pain, dismay, and hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, for sharing those powerful words. If anybody would like to read Paul's essays, it's actually on FIUnews.com. Nancy Dumas, otherwise known as Onyx, is a Florida native of 30 years. Her writing explores themes of life, death, love, family, and her experience as a Black woman. She is an Art Institute grad and practices painting and photography. Her new book of poetry will be published in 2023. Nancy, feel free to take the floor.
It is hard being a woman, especially Black. It seems like everywhere we go, we're under attack. Can you imagine living in a world where no one really has your back? Constantly on edge, never afraid to send our sons out into the world because they may never come back. Can you see yourself living like that? It is hard being a woman, especially Black. It seems as though we have too many inequality gaps. When it comes to education, jobs, pay, housing, and all that, systemic oppression. Do you have to deal with that? Really just telling you things like you can't live here just because you are Black. Or people asking you questions like, girl, can you afford to spend like that? Because even though we work hard, our pay doesn't match. If we get upset, or we confused as an attack. So we have to tell ourselves, girl, you better relax. If they label being a Black woman, it's not where it's at. It is hard being a woman, especially Black. Because as women, we've come so far, but as Black women, it feels as though we've been left back. We know it's not intentional, but those are the facts. That we fight the good fight to both racial and gender injustice class. Our voting rights, we pushed and we pushed, we took no crap. And in the 1920s, we made an impact. But it wasn't until 1965 that we as Black women, we officially won that. Yet we keep pushing through each and every setback, whether we be a Republican or a Democrat. Because as we know, it is hard being a woman, especially Black.
Leslie Gomez-Gonzalez is a BFA studio major, graduating FIU this semester. Congratulations. Leslie is a multidisciplinary artist. Her work adopts practices of care and routine as a means of understanding and honoring the body's habits, processes, and needs. She explores the performances of the cultural ideologies passed down to her concerning issues such as idealized femininity. She intends to live as a practicing artist and hopes to be part of a community that is working towards educating and providing a space for everyone. In her writing, she further navigates through her sexuality and her blackness as a Dominican woman. Welcome, Leslie Gomez-Gonzalez.
Commemorate me with at least the perfect caption. We all know this picture simply won't do. I stand before you, ready to offer myself to you. Fresh I am, forbidden, bright red, exotic is this flesh. Pay extra, as I am collected here for you. Pay extra for the weight I bear in these hands, buries me far beneath you. This isn't to say that I lack any foundation or self-respect. Love, maybe just a bit, but these are just circumstances. The only angle that matters is that which keeps your ankles to the 34th degree, easily breakable. The pressure in your ligaments breeds wealth in a woman who still manages to stand up straight.
Thank you, Leslie. Kamari Willis is a sophomore studying recreational therapy here at FIU, with hopes of becoming a physical therapist. She sings, writes poetry, and enjoys playing volleyball. Kamari holds the title of Miss Omega Psi Phi 2019 and is a member of the National Society of Leadership and Success. Come on down, Kamari.
The poem that I'm reciting is an original piece entitled Love Don't Live. You are better than me. Love don't live here anymore. Just a vacancy. Love don't live here anymore. Love don't live here. I'm an empty house, lights off, a vacant shell, dark and cold like a smoke means last breath. There's no laughter.
even though it is a masterpiece created from your own, the day that I have to pay for the way my kids play in that play is the day that I can perform towards you. It's the day that I will ever leave with her. It's the day that my sense of self-worth is all gone. Love me the way that I need. You're clearly not going to do it. I'm too independent, so you just take the crew and you sweep me to the side of the room of our ancestors, jumping over rooms, celebrating infections, covering up the rooms that y'all connected us in bedrooms and closets, shoving away truth like old shoes in dusty boxes to make your body apparent to the Winchesters. So don't tell me to calm down. Don't be so angry because I have no room to be anything with. Punched in the face, stabbed in the gut, I'm not very protected. The one who was supposed to love me. I know you said you could sing, but I wasn't expecting that. Thank you so much. All right. Last but of course, definitely not least, Amber Reed Robinson is a junior majoring in English and Economics at Florida International University. She recently contributed to her first published post-secondary academic paper titled Improving Spanish Language Teacher Retention and Success Among Black Spanish Language Learners in HSI-HBCU Collaboration. When not writing, Amber enjoys reading current events, performing spoken word, learning new languages, got my language tied up, right, and watching social justice films. So far, she has performed her spoken word pieces at the Howard Theater in Washington, D.C., and a couple other venues. Prospectively, Amber aspires to be a civil rights lawyer. Let's welcome our final performer, Amber Reed Robinson.
Hello, everyone. As Emily introduced me and everything, I'm definitely grateful to be here. Grateful to be here with my sister, Kimari, and grateful for the entire opportunity. So today I will be performing a piece entitled The War, which basically speaks about being a Black woman and also the numerous missing Black women that we have in the United States of America. The War. 64,000 and counting, that's the estimated number of missing Black women in the United States of America. Perhaps you haven't noticed. I would not be surprised because it would not be the first time that Black women have gone unnoticed. To be a Black woman sometimes feels like you have to fight with Jezebel and Mamie, not to be a hand-me-down stereotype, except your hands are bound and they've knocked your crown crooked, like they paid for it. To be a Black woman sometimes feels like being a gatekeeper. You have to pick and choose which battles you let go to war inside your body. It's trench warfare. When the more you pull yourself up by the bootstraps, the thicker the mud gets. To be a Black woman sometimes feels like being a caretaker. To the caged bird that finds residence in my rib cage. No one told her that her own feathers would weigh more than the baggage, but you can't clip the wings of an uplifted bird. Caged bird does not only sing lullabies. She sings every Sunday in the church choir, the Negro spirituals, where she wades in the water, the amazing graces that grace the tips of the 16th Street Baptist Church, Mother Emmanuel A&E. When the Dylan roof could not keep her from soaring, tiptoeing on the Tallahatchie River, she's the world's greatest tap dancer. And if Jesus walks on water, she's tripping on that mainstream. To be a Black woman sometimes feels like being in the ocean, expected to absorb the sticks and stones thrown. If you listen to her heartbeat close enough, you'll hear the wings of the caged bird flutter. The words of Maya Angelou and Toni Morrison smooth her skin like cocoa butter. A Black woman is truly like no other, and I will go to war for her like no other. Thank you.
such wonderful performances. It was truly a pleasure having you here speak at the museum, being brave and being vulnerable, so thank you. I know that it's not easy. This concludes our virtual poetry program. On behalf of the Frost Art Museum, we thank you for joining us, and we truly appreciate your support. We hope to see you at the museum sometime soon. And thank you for tuning in, and don't forget to continue to diversify the narrative.